If you've ever been through a serious breakup, you know that feeling. It's this uniquely awful pain. But have you ever stopped to wonder what is actually going on inside your brain and your body at that moment? Well, it turns out that feeling of being physically crushed by heartbreak, that's not just a metaphor. There is some incredible science behind it.
Yeah, we've all heard this, right? Maybe we've even said it ourselves. We use words like hurt, pain, and ache when we talk about a relationship ending, and it feels so real, so physical. It's almost impossible to believe it's just an emotional thing.
So that brings us to the big question we're going to tackle here. Are all these physical feelings just us being dramatic? Or is there a genuine, measurable connection between our minds and our bodies that makes a broken heart physically hurt? Let's find out. Okay, so to really get to the bottom of this, here's our game plan. We're going to start by asking if a heart can truly break. Then we'll look at how your brain actually processes this pain, see how the body kicks into emergency mode, explore the chemistry that glues us together, figure out why this pain sticks around for so long, and finally uncover the deep evolutionary reason for it all. All right, first things first, let's step away from the poetry and get into the science. For centuries, we've treated a broken heart like an idea, a figure of speech. But what does the actual evidence tell us?
Well, the science is pretty clear now that pain is very, very real. As one researcher, Edward E. Smith, said, when people are saying, I really feel in pain about this breakup, you don't want to trivialize it and dismiss it by saying it's all in your mind. And that right there is the fundamental shift in how we're starting to understand this.
And you know where we find the first absolutely stunning piece of evidence? Inside the brain itself. This is where things start to get really wild.
So to figure this out, scientists came up with this really clever experiment. They brought in 40 people who had just gone through a really bad, unwanted breakup. And they decided to compare the brain's reaction to that emotional pain with its reaction to a classic physical pain. In this case, the feeling of being burned by a cup that's way too hot.
And what they found was just wow. It was a total game changer. When the participants looked at a photo of their ex, the parts of their brain that lit up on the fMRI scan were the exact same ones that fired up when they felt that burning heat on their arm. So social pain and physical pain, they share the same neural real estate. It's not a metaphor. To your brain, they are the same kind of threat.
Now what's so fascinating is how that signal from the brain sets off this chain reaction, this cascade of effects throughout your entire body. It's not just a thought. It becomes a full-blown physical event.
So here's how it works. Your brain perceives this loss, this breakup, as a genuine threat to your survival. And that kickstarts your body's ancient fight-or-flight system into overdrive. Your whole system gets flooded with stress hormones, things like cortisol and adrenaline, basically preparing you to fight a predator that isn't actually there. And this flood of cortisol, this is what causes all those physical symptoms we know so well. It's why your muscles tense up, leading to headaches and that crushing tightness in your chest. It's why blood gets pulled away from your digestive system, causing stomach cramps and making you lose your appetite. It can even weaken your immune system, which is why that post-breakup cold is such a common thing. Your body is basically stuck in a state of emergency.
Now, in the most extreme cases, all of this overwhelming stress can lead to a very real, medically recognized condition, Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, but you probably know it by its more common name, broken heart syndrome. It mostly affects women, and it looks and feels exactly like a heart attack, but there are no blocked arteries.
And the condition gets its name from the bizarre shape the heart's left ventricle takes. It balloons out and actually looks like a traditional Japanese octopus trap, which is called a takotsubo. Now, the good news here is that this is almost always temporary. The heart is amazingly resilient, and it usually goes back to its normal shape once that intense stress starts to fade. But that just raises another question, right? Why are we wired for such an extreme reaction in the first place? Well, the answer is in the powerful neurochemistry that creates our closest bonds. It's all explained by this idea called the brain-opioid theory of social attachment. The theory basically says that when we form close social bonds, our brains release their own natural opioids. These are the chemicals that give us those feelings of warmth, comfort, and just pure contentment when we're with people we love. It's like a neurochemical reward for connecting with others. So think about it. When you're in a happy relationship, you're getting this steady, rewarding drip of these feel-good chemicals. But when that relationship ends, boom, the supply is just cut off. Your brain's opioid activity plummets, and your body goes into a state of what's called separation distress. It doesn't just feel like withdrawal. From a brain chemistry perspective, it is withdrawal.
And that whole chemical withdrawal thing leads to another question I'm sure you've asked. Why does the memory of a broken bone fade,
but the memory of a broken heart can feel just as sharp years later.
It's because unlike physical pain, which is really hard to recall in its full intensity once it's gone, we can relive social pain. Just thinking about the rejection can bring back that same gut punch feeling with horrible clarity, sometimes months or even years down the road. And research shows our brains are specifically wired to do this.
The reason is all about how our brain remembers these two different kinds of pain. When you try to relive social pain, your brain fires up the region that deals with your mental and emotional state. This literally re-engages the brain's emotional pain system, making you feel the hurt all over again. But when you try to remember a physical pain, your brain is trying to recall sensory data that just isn't there anymore, so the sharpest edges of it fade away.
So when you put all of this together, the shared pain pathways in the brain, the body's emergency response, the chemical withdrawal, it all starts to point to a much, much bigger story about who we are as a species.
Look, the intense pain of heartbreak, it's not a design flaw, it's a feature. It's an ancient, evolutionary alarm system. For our earliest ancestors, being cast out from the tribe was basically a death sentence. So our brains evolved this incredibly powerful pain response to social rejection to make sure we did everything we could to maintain our social bonds, because our survival literally depended on it.
And that kind of leaves us with one final thought to chew on. If our biology treats losing a relationship with the same urgency as a physical wound, if it will literally risk damaging our hearts just to signal how important a social bond is, what does that tell us about how vital human connection truly is? It suggests that our relationships, they aren't just a nice part of our lives. In a very real biological sense, they are our lives.